believed in building things to last. Whether it was the custom furniture he crafted in his workshop or the life he had painstakingly constructed, he approached everything with precision and care. At 43, he had the calloused hands of a craftsman and the sharp eyes of someone who measured twice before cutting once. Before meeting Vanessa, Dominic's life had been defined by discipline. 8 years in Army Special Forces had shaped him into someone who could survive anywhere, adapt to anything. After military service, he'd channeled that same focus into building Voss custom designs, transforming it from a one-man operation in his garage to a thriving business creating high-end furniture for wealthy clients across the Northeast. The first time Vanessa Klein walked into his showroom, Dominic noticed how she ran her manicured fingertips along the grain of an oak dining table he'd spent months perfecting. Her touch was appreciative, knowing, "This is extraordinary craftsmanship," she'd said without looking up. "I can feel the patience in it." Their courtship had been swift, too swift, his friend Liam had warned. But Dominic, who had spent years in the calculated world of military precision and business logistics, found himself disarmed by Vanessa's spontaneity and warmth. Within 8 months, they were married. "You're taking on a lot," Liam had said at the wedding reception, nodding toward 13-year-old Ivy, who was busy texting in the corner rather than participating in the celebration. "A teenager isn't exactly an easy addition." Dominic had shrugged. "Vanessa's package deal. Besides, the kid needs stability. Her father's barely in the picture." That wasn't entirely true. Silas Mercer remained on the periphery of their lives, occasionally appearing for holidays or special events, but mostly communicating through sporadic child support payments and expensive gifts that arrived without warning. Dominic had met him only twice, once at the wedding, where Silas had shaken his hand with a grip that lingered a beat too long, and again at Ivy's high school graduation. "I trust you're taking good care of my girls," Silas had said both times, his smile never quite reaching his eyes. Dominic had built their life carefully. The 4-bedroom colonial in Oak Ridge Hills, the college fund for Ivy, the vacations that Vanessa meticulously documented on social media. He'd sacrificed time in his workshop to attend Ivy's swim meets and helped her with calculus homework late into the night. When she'd been accepted to Westlake University, her father's alma mater, Dominic had written the first tuition check without hesitation. "You don't have to do this," Vanessa had whispered as they'd stood in the financial aid office. "Silas should be handling this." "We're a family," Dominic had replied. "This is what families do." For 4 years, he'd written those checks, even as his business weathered a recession and he'd taken out a second mortgage on their home. Even as Ivy's calls home became less frequent and her visits shorter. Even as Vanessa began taking weekend trips to clear her head or visit her sister Patty. Dominic built things to last. But he'd missed the cracks forming in the foundation. Chapter 2, Fissures. The cracks had been there from the beginning. Dominic just hadn't wanted to see them. 5 years into their marriage, Whitney Reed had placed a manila envelope on his workshop table, disrupting the fine layer of sawdust. "You said you wanted everything," the private investigator had said, her expression professionally neutral. Dominic had hired Whitney after finding unexplained charges on their joint credit card. Weekend stays at hotels just 2 hours away. Expensive dinners for 2 at restaurants Vanessa had never mentioned visiting. He'd told himself it was just to put his mind at ease. The photos inside the envelope showed Vanessa and Silas together at a lakeside resort, holding hands across a restaurant table, kissing in the hotel elevator. The final image, entering a room together, Silas's hand possessively on the small of Vanessa's back. "Been going on for at least a year, possibly longer," Whitney had said. "Regular meetings, usually when your stepdaughter has breaks from school. They're careful, but not careful enough." Dominic had paid Whitney her fee and asked her to keep the information on file. Then he'd put the envelope in his workshop safe and tried to forget it existed. "What do you want to do?" Whitney had asked. "Nothing. Yet," Dominic had replied. "Ivy graduates next spring. I need time to think." He'd spent a year watching and waiting, wrestling with his options. Confrontation. Divorce. Forgiveness. None felt right. During that year, he'd continued writing tuition checks, continued kissing Vanessa goodbye in the mornings, continued answering Ivy's infrequent calls with forced enthusiasm. During that year, he'd also started preparing, moving money into accounts Vanessa couldn't access, securing copies of financial records, making connections with clients in other states. purchasing a modest cabin in Montana under an LLC not connected to his name. Liam, now a partner at his law firm, had raised his eyebrows when Dominic outlined his preparations. This isn't just covering your bases, Dom. This is scorched earth. I'm being thorough. You're building an escape tunnel and wiring the house with explosives at the same time. Dominic had shrugged. Special forces always have a way out and a contingency plan. And what's the trigger? When do you decide whether to use the tunnel or the explosives? I'll know it when I see it. The morning of Ivy's graduation from Westlake University, Dominic had risen early, knotted his tie with military precision, and placed a check for $25,000 in an envelope, a graduation gift to help Ivy start her adult life. On the drive to campus, Vanessa had been unusually quiet, checking her phone frequently and smiling at messages she didn't share. Nervous for her? Dominic had asked. What? Oh, yes. Big day. Vanessa's smile hadn't reached her eyes. I'm going to find her before the ceremony. Why don't you find our seats? As Dominic made his way through the crowded campus, he spotted Ivy near the science building, already in her cap and gown, laughing with a group of friends. He'd raised his hand to wave when he heard her voice, clear and cutting through the ambient noise. God, I can't believe it's finally over. For years of my life wasted in this place. At least you got a degree out of it, one of her friends had replied. Ivy had tossed her hair, the gesture so like her mother's. A degree I'll never use. I didn't even go to half my classes. My idiot stepdad paid for everything thinking I was the perfect student. Dominic had frozen, his hand still half raised. Seriously? Another friend had asked. How'd you get away with that? Mom handled it. She'd call professors or the administration whenever there was an issue. She's been planning this for years, getting me through school on his dime while she and Dad built their nest egg. Isn't that like fraud or something? Ivy's laugh had been sharp. Who cares? Once Mom finalizes the divorce, she and Dad are moving to Arizona. They already bought a house there. Poor Dominic has no idea what's coming. Dominic had lowered his hand and stepped back into the shadow of a building. The envelope with the check suddenly felt heavy in his pocket. He'd watched as Ivy rejoined the procession of graduates, his mind unusually calm despite the roaring in his ears. He found his way to the main ceremony, spotting Vanessa in the family section. Next to her sat Silas Mercer, looking tanned and fit in an expensive suit. They weren't touching, maintaining a public distance, but Dominic could see the synchronicity in their movements, the way they leaned toward each other when speaking, the private smiles, the comfortable familiarity. He took a seat several rows behind them, close enough to observe but not to be immediately noticed. Throughout the ceremony, he watched as they checked their phones simultaneously, heads bent together over some shared message. When Ivy's name was called, they both stood and cheered, Silas's arm briefly encircling Vanessa's waist in a gesture of shared pride. After the ceremony, Dominic followed at a distance as they made their way to a prearranged meeting point with Ivy. He stood behind a large oak tree, close enough to hear their conversation. You did it, baby. Vanessa had embraced Ivy. I'm so proud of you. Thanks, Mom. Is everything ready at home? All set for the party. Your father and I have a surprise for you. Silas had pulled a small box from his pocket. Early graduation gift. Keys to your new car. It's parked at your mother's house, ready for the drive to Arizona. Ivy had squealed and thrown her arms around Silas. Over her shoulder, Silas had met Vanessa's eyes with a smile that made Dominic's stomach clench. Where's the wallet? Ivy had asked suddenly. Did he come? Of course, Vanessa had replied. He's around somewhere. Probably talking to some of the parents. Did he bring a gift? Ivy's tone was nakedly mercenary. He'd better have, Silas had laughed. After all we've put into this plan. 4 years of tuition, Vanessa had agreed. What an idiot. He never even checked if she was actually attending classes. Ivy had laughed then, the sound carrying clearly to where Dominic stood. What an idiot. I never even went to class. Vanessa's smile had been cold and satisfied. The money went to your new dad, who will join us soon after the divorce. In that moment, Dominic had made his decision. Tunnel, not explosives. A clean extraction with maximal damage left behind. He'd turned and walked away from the graduation, from the family he'd tried to build, from the life that had been constructed on lies. That night, while Vanessa hosted Ivy's graduation party, a party he'd paid for, but now would not attend, Dominic had made his final preparations. Chapter 3. Collapse. Dominic worked methodically through the night while the sounds of Ivy's graduation party drifted up from the first floor. Laughter, music, the clink of glasses. Vanessa had sent him several texts wondering where he was. He'd replied that he had a migraine and was resting upstairs, would join later if he felt better. The lie bought him time. First, he transferred the remaining balance from their joint accounts, nearly $78,000, to his private account. Next, he collected the items he'd been gradually storing in his workshop safe: passports, birth certificate, military records, the manila envelope from Whitney Reed, and various financial documents that proved he'd paid for Ivy's education. He packed a single suitcase with essential clothing and personal items, things chosen for utility rather than sentiment. His wedding ring he left on the bedside table. At 1:27 a.m., as the party finally wound down, he sent a text to Liam, pulling the trigger. Tunnel, not explosives. Will contact in 48 hours. Liam's response came immediately. Understood. Safe travels. Dominic waited until he heard Vanessa and Ivy coming up the stairs, their voices slightly slurred from celebration. Should we check on him? Ivy asked, her voice carrying through the door. Let him sleep, Vanessa replied. We'll tell him tomorrow. No reason to spoil the night. There was a pause, then Ivy again. Do you think he suspects anything? Dominic? No. He sees what he wants to see. The happy family he always wanted. Men like him are so easy to fool. Their voices faded as they moved down the hallway to their respective rooms. Dominic shouldered his bag and made his way silently down the back staircase that led to his workshop. His truck was parked behind the detached garage, out of sight from the main house. Before leaving, he completed one final task, placing a large manila envelope on Vanessa's pillow. Inside was a copy of the divorce papers he'd had drawn up months ago, along with a USB drive containing copies of Whitney's surveillance photos and a detailed accounting of every penny he'd spent on Ivy's education. No note, no explanation. They would understand soon enough. By 2 a.m., Dominic was on the highway, heading west toward Montana. His phone, set to airplane mode, sat on the passenger seat. He would check it once, after 24 hours, to confirm the chaos he'd left behind. Then the device would be discarded, replaced by one registered under his new identity, an identity that had been carefully constructed over the past year. Dominic Voss, the dutiful husband and stepfather, had vanished. In his place was a man with nothing left to lose and years of calculated patience to unleash. The next morning, exactly 24 hours after his departure, Dominic pulled into a rest stop outside of Billings, Montana. He took his phone off airplane mode and watched as notifications flooded the screen. 87 missed calls, most from Vanessa, some from Ivy, a few from Silas, whose number he recognized from Whitney's reports. Hundreds of text messages, their tone evolving from confusion to anger to panic. Where are you? Why is there a folder on my pillow? What did you do with our money? Answer your phone. You can't just disappear like this. Please come home so we can talk about this. Do you know what you've done? The final message from Vanessa had been sent just an hour earlier. You've ruined everything. Silas is furious. If you think you can just walk away, you're wrong. We will find you. Dominic smiled for the first time in days. Let them try. He'd spent 8 years in special forces learning how to disappear. He'd spent the last year planning this escape. And he'd spent the last decade of civilian life building connections across the country. Clients who respected his work and his discretion, who would have no reason to connect the master craftsman who might arrive in their town with the man who had vanished from Connecticut. He typed a single message to Liam. Phase 1 complete. Beginning Phase 2. Then he removed the SIM card, broke it in half, and dropped the phone into a trash can. The architect had walked away from his crumbling creation, but not before ensuring that those who had undermined the foundation would be buried in the rubble. Chapter 4. Aftershocks. 3 months after Dominic's disappearance, Vanessa Voss sat across from her divorce attorney, Barbara Hollingsworth, in a downtown office that charged $450 per hour. The view of the harbor through the floor-to-ceiling windows would normally have calmed her, but today nothing could ease the knot of anxiety in her stomach. So he's just gone? Barbara asked, reviewing the file. No contact at all. Vanessa rubbed her temples. Nothing direct. The only communication has been through his attorney. She gestured to the papers on the desk. And these ridiculous divorce terms. Barbara adjusted her glasses. They're not actually that unusual, Mrs. Voss. Given the circumstances. Given what circumstances? Vanessa snapped. My husband abandoned me, emptied our accounts, and disappeared. He's the one at fault here. Barbara's expression remained neutral. According to these documents, your husband has evidence of your long-term affair with Silas Mercer, your daughter's biological father. He also has proof that you misrepresented your daughter's college attendance and diverted funds meant for her education. That's absurd. Is it? Barbara slid across several photographs. His attorney provided these as a sample of what they have. There are apparently hundreds more, plus financial records. Vanessa stared at the images of herself and Silas at various locations over the past several years. This is invasion of privacy. This is evidence of adultery, which is still grounds for divorce in this state. Barbara sighed. Look, Mrs. Voss, I'll be direct. Your husband is offering a settlement that gives you the house and car, free and clear. No alimony, but no claims against you either. Under the circumstances, I'd advise you to take it. The house has a second mortgage he took out. And what about the business? Our savings. The business was his before the marriage. The savings. Barbara consulted the file. He's documented that the missing funds equal almost exactly what was spent on your daughter's education, plus liquidated retirement accounts that were in his name only. He can't just. He did. And legally, it would be difficult to prove wrongdoing, especially given the. Barbara paused, searching for a diplomatic phrase. Given the documented circumstances of the marriage's dissolution. Vanessa slumped in her chair. This wasn't how it was supposed to go. The plan had been perfect. Secure Ivy's education on Dominic's dime, quietly transfer assets to the accounts she shared with Silas, then file for divorce citing Dominic's workaholic tendencies and emotional distance. With Ivy graduated, there would be no more child support or educational expenses. She and Silas would finally be free to be together openly, comfortable with the nest egg they'd built. Instead, Dominic had vanished, leaving her with a mortgaged house, an empty bank account, and a trail of evidence that made her look like the villain. There's something else, Barbara said. The private investigator who gathered this evidence, a Whitney Reed, has been in contact with several of your joint acquaintances. Vanessa froze. What? Apparently, she's been conducting interviews about the nature of your relationship with Mr. Mercer. Very discreet, but word has gotten around. Barbara's tone was carefully neutral. Your sister Patricia was apparently quite forthcoming. Patty, of course. Her sister had always been jealous of Vanessa's life, her marriage, her seemingly perfect arrangement. Patty had known about Silas all along, had even covered for Vanessa several times. But she'd made her disapproval clear. You're playing a dangerous game, Patty had warned just last year. Dominic's not stupid, and he doesn't strike me as the forgiving type. Vanessa had brushed off the warning. Dominic had been so easy to manipulate, so eager to be the family man he'd never had the chance to be before. His own parents had died when he was young, leaving him to bounce between distant relatives. He'd been so pathetically grateful for the ready-made family she'd offered. Until he wasn't. Fine, Vanessa said finally. I'll take the settlement. But I want this finished quickly. As she left the attorney's office, Vanessa's phone buzzed with a text from Silas. We need to talk. Now. 20 minutes later, she sat across from Silas at a coffee shop several blocks away. At 51, Silas Mercer still cut an impressive figure, steel gray hair, athletic build maintained by expensive trainers, the confident posture of a man accustomed to getting his way. But today his hands shook slightly as he set down his coffee cup. The Arizona property is gone, he said without preamble. What do you mean gone? I mean the sale fell through. The financing was contingent on liquid assets we no longer have access to. What about your accounts? Silas's jaw tightened. Frozen. All of them. Some kind of audit triggered by suspicious activity. What suspicious activity? That's the thing, there wasn't any. At least, not on my end. He leaned forward. This has your husband's fingerprints all over it. Ex-husband, soon. Vanessa corrected automatically. And how could Dominic possibly freeze your accounts? He doesn't even know about them. Doesn't he? Silas pushed his phone across the table. On the screen was an email from Silas's bank, acknowledging receipt of documents detailing potential fraud. What is this? Someone sent my bank detailed records of transfers between accounts registered to shell companies in my name and Ivy's college. Transactions I never made. Vanessa's blood ran cold. Dominic created false records? That's illegal. Silas laughed bitterly. That's the thing. The transactions are real. Someone used my identity to set up those accounts years ago. The money trail leads directly from your joint accounts to Ivy's tuition and then to accounts I supposedly control. He ran a hand through his immaculate hair. Whoever did this was meticulous. The documentation goes back almost 4 years. But that's when we started. Vanessa trailed off as realization dawned. He's known all along. This wasn't a sudden discovery. He's been planning this for years. Planning what exactly? Silas demanded. Before Vanessa could respond, her phone chimed with an email notification. The sender was anonymous, but the subject line froze her in place. 4 years of tuition, the complete accounting. With trembling fingers, she opened the email. There was no message, just an attachment, a video file. She clicked play. The video showed Ivy in her cap and gown at graduation, laughing with her friends. The audio was crystal clear. What an idiot. I never even went to class. Then Vanessa's own voice, not from the graduation, but from their kitchen the night before. Tomorrow it's official. Once the divorce goes through, we take everything he worked for and disappear. Silas's voice, off camera. The bastard never saw it coming. The video cut to black, replaced by text. A copy has been sent to the university's Academic Integrity Office, the IRS, and select members of your social circle. Regards, D. Vanessa stared at Silas, her face ashen. He's not just running away, she whispered. He's destroying us from a distance. Chapter 5, Countermeasures. You're sure it's him? Silas asked as they sat in his lawyer's office 2 days later. Maurice Powell, a shark in an Italian suit, had represented Silas through 2 previous divorces and numerous business disputes. Unlike Barbara Hollingsworth, Powell made no pretense of neutrality. He was a weapon pointed at his client's enemies. The videos have been expertly edited, but they're authentic recordings, Powell confirmed. No judge would throw them out based on how they were obtained. The content is too damning. So we're screwed, Vanessa concluded. Not necessarily. Powell tapped his pen against his legal pad. We need to change the narrative. Right now, Dominic Voss looks like the wronged husband who discovered his wife's betrayal. We need to make him look like a vindictive, potentially dangerous man who's using his military background to terrorize you. How do we do that? Silas asked. Restraining order, for starters. We allege that these communications constitute harassment and that you fear for your safety. We emphasize his special forces training, suggest he's unstable, possibly suffering from PTSD. But he hasn't threatened us, Vanessa pointed out. Powell smiled thinly. Hasn't he? A reasonable person might interpret these actions as implied threats. And if you were to start experiencing concerning incidents, that might reinforce that perception. Silas leaned forward. What kind of incidents? Nothing too dramatic. Strange noises at night. Signs of someone watching the house. Perhaps some minor property damage that could be attributed to someone with tactical training. Powell shrugged. The police might not take action without concrete evidence, but it would establish a pattern of concern for the court. You want us to fake being stalked? Vanessa clarified. I want you to document your legitimate concerns about a man who clearly has the skills and motivation to cause you harm. Powell's voice was smooth. Mr. Voss isn't the only one who can control a narrative. That evening, Vanessa sat alone in the kitchen of the house that was now technically hers, though it felt like a museum of a life that had never been real. The restraining order had been filed that afternoon, not against Dominic directly, as they had no valid address to serve him, but as a general protective order that would be triggered if he made contact. Her phone rang, Ivy calling from the apartment she'd moved into after graduation. Mom, what the hell is going on? The university's Academic Integrity Office called me in for a meeting tomorrow. Vanessa closed her eyes. Someone sent them evidence that you didn't actually attend classes. What? Who would? Ivy stopped. Wait, is this about Dominic? He found out, honey. About everything. The plan, the money, Silas, all of it. So what? He's gone. What can he do now? Apparently, quite a lot. Vanessa sighed. Don't worry about the university. Your father is handling it. Just be prepared for some difficult questions. After hanging up, Vanessa poured herself a generous glass of wine and carried it to the living room. The house felt too quiet, too empty. For a moment, she found herself missing Dominic, not because she loved him, but because his presence had made the house feel safe. With him gone, the shadows seemed deeper, the creaks more ominous. A noise from the backyard made her freeze. A sharp crack, like a twig snapping under deliberate pressure. Then silence. Her hand shaking, Vanessa reached for her phone and pulled up the new security app Silas had installed for her. The backyard camera showed nothing unusual, just the patio furniture and Dominic's workshop in the distance, dark and locked since his departure. As she watched, the motion sensor light above the workshop door suddenly illuminated, casting harsh shadows across the yard. Nothing moved in the frame. After 30 seconds, the light switched off. Vanessa's heart pounded. It could be an animal, a technical glitch, or she dialed the police. "I'd like to report a prowler," she said when the dispatcher answered. "I'm alone, and I have reason to believe my estranged husband might be watching the house." 2 officers arrived 15 minutes later, conducted a thorough search of the property, and found nothing disturbed. The younger officer seemed skeptical, but the older one was more understanding. "We'll increase patrols in your area," he assured her. "And you did the right thing with the restraining order. If he does show up, we'll have grounds to arrest him immediately." After they left, Vanessa sent a text to Silas. "I think he was here. Police found nothing. What if this is just the beginning?" His reply came quickly. "Good. Document everything. Powell says we need to establish a pattern." Vanessa stared at the message, a cold feeling settling in her stomach. Had there really been someone in the yard, or had she imagined it? Was she genuinely afraid, or just playing a part in Powell's strategy? And somewhere out there, was Dominic watching, calculating his next move? She jumped at a sudden noise, the distinctive chime of an email arriving. The sender was anonymous, but she recognized the pattern now. Heart racing, she opened the message. Inside was a single line of text. Motion-activated cameras work both ways. "Sleep well, Vanessa." Attached was a photo taken through her living room window, timestamped just minutes ago. It showed her, phone in hand, face illuminated by the screen as she texted Silas. This time, when Vanessa called the police, her fear was entirely genuine. Chapter 6. Pressure Points. "Nothing," Detective Roland Ferris confirmed as he closed his notebook. "No fingerprints, no evidence of tampering with your security system, and no traceable origin for the emails." Vanessa clutched her robe tighter around herself. It was 7:15 a.m., and she hadn't slept all night after receiving the photo. Roland, Detective Ferris, had been assigned to her case after her 3rd call to the police in 2 weeks. "So you can't help me," she concluded. "I didn't say that." Roland was in his late 40s, with the steady demeanor of someone who had seen it all but still cared. "Based on the evidence, I agree that you're being monitored. The question is by whom?" "I told you, it's my husband." "Ex-husband," Roland corrected, echoing her own words to Silas weeks earlier. "And while Mr. Voss is certainly a person of interest, we have no proof he's in the area. His credit cards haven't been used. His phone is inactive. His vehicle was found abandoned at a long-term parking lot near Hartford 3 months ago. He was Special Forces," Vanessa insisted. "He knows how to disappear. I'm aware of his background. I've reviewed his service record." Roland's expression softened slightly. "Mrs. Voss, I'm not dismissing your concerns. But I need to ask, who else might have motivation to frighten you?" "No one." "What about Silas Mercer?" Vanessa stiffened. "What about him?" "Mr. Mercer stands to benefit if your ex-husband appears threatening. According to the divorce filings, there are significant financial implications if Mr. Voss is found to be harassing you." "That's absurd." Silas wouldn't. "Mr. Mercer has a history of manipulative behavior in his previous divorces, and he was with you when several of these incidents occurred." Vanessa stood abruptly. "I think you should leave, Detective. Unless you're going to actually help me." Roland handed her his card. "Call me directly if anything else happens. Day or night." He paused at the door. "And Mrs. Voss? Be careful who you trust." After he left, Vanessa sank onto the couch, her mind racing. Could Silas be behind the surveillance? The timing of the incidents had been convenient for their legal strategy. But the photo from last night, she hadn't told Silas she was being watched until after receiving it. Her phone rang. Patty's name flashed on the screen. "I just got the strangest call," her sister said without preamble. "Someone claiming to be from an insurance company, asking about Dominic's state of mind before he disappeared. They mentioned possible fraud investigations." "What did you tell them?" "Nothing." I hung up. But then I started thinking, that private investigator interviewed me months ago about you and Silas. What if Dominic left because he found out you were planning to take him for everything. Patty, don't start. No, you listen. I warned you this would blow up in your face. I covered for you with Silas because you're my sister, but what you did to Dominic was wrong. He was good to you. Good to Ivy. He abandoned me. After discovering you'd been lying to him for years. After learning that his stepdaughter, who he put through college, was laughing at him behind his back. Patty's voice hardened. You made your bed, Vanessa. Now you get to lie in it. Alone. The line went dead. Vanessa stared at the phone, tears of frustration welling in her eyes. Everything was unraveling. Ivy's academic standing was under review. Silas's accounts remained frozen. The Arizona dream home was lost. And now even Patty was turning against her. Her phone chimed with a text from Silas. Powell wants to meet. Said it's urgent. His office at noon. Maurice Powell looked uncharacteristically rattled when they arrived at his office. His tie was slightly askew, and a fine sheen of sweat glistened on his forehead. We have a problem, he announced as soon as the door closed. A significant one. What now? Silas asked wearily. Powell slid a document across the desk. This arrived by courier an hour ago. It's a civil complaint naming both of you as defendants in a fraud case. What fraud? Vanessa demanded. According to this, you conspired to misappropriate funds intended for educational purposes and diverted them to personal accounts. Powell looked directly at Silas. Accounts that you controlled. That's the same accusation from before, Silas said dismissively. My bank is already investigating. This isn't from a bank. It's a federal complaint. Wire fraud across state lines. Powell's voice dropped. This is FBI territory, not a civil matter. The blood drained from Vanessa's face. Can they prove anything? The complaint includes detailed documentation of every transfer, all tied to your late-night conversations about the scheme. Powell removed his glasses and rubbed the bridge of his nose. Frankly, it's one of the most meticulously prepared cases I've ever seen. Whoever assembled it has been planning this for years. Dominic, Vanessa whispered. But how could he have known? We were so careful. Powell laughed humorlessly. Clearly not careful enough. The complaint references recordings dating back to 3 years ago. He's been gathering evidence while continuing to play the dutiful husband and stepfather. What do we do? Silas asked, his confident demeanor finally cracking. You prepare for the possibility of criminal charges, Powell said bluntly. And you hope that Mr. Voss can be located and persuaded to withdraw the complaint. And if he can't? Vanessa asked. Powell's expression was grim. Then I suggest you both find criminal defense attorneys. This is beyond my expertise. As they left Powell's office, Silas gripped Vanessa's arm painfully. This ends now. We need to find him. How? The police have been looking for months. The police have procedures. Limitations. Silas's eyes had a dangerous gleam. I don't. What are you going to do? Whatever it takes. Dominic Voss isn't the only one with resources. Silas checked his watch. I have calls to make. Go home and wait for me to contact you. Alone again in the too-quiet house, Vanessa poured herself a drink and tried to think clearly. Everything had spiraled out of control so quickly. The plan that had seemed so perfect was now a noose tightening around her neck. Her phone chimed, an email notification. With trembling fingers, she opened it, expecting another threat from the anonymous sender she now knew was Dominic. Instead, it was from Whitney Reed, the private investigator. We should talk. In person. About Dominic Voss. Vanessa stared at the message, hope and fear battling within her. This could be a trap, or it could be her chance to finally locate Dominic and end this nightmare. After a moment's hesitation, she replied, When and where? The response came immediately, tomorrow, noon. The boathouse at Lakeside Park. Come alone. Chapter 7, Convergence. The boathouse at Lakeside Park stood at the end of a weathered dock, its red paint faded by years of sun and storm. Vanessa arrived 15 minutes early, her nerves frayed after another sleepless night. She'd told no one about the meeting, not Silas, not Powell, not even Detective Ferris, though his card remained in her purse. Whitney Reed was already there, leaning against the railing, watching the water. In her mid-30s, with cropped dark hair and observant eyes, she had the composed demeanor of someone accustomed to waiting and watching. Mrs. Voss, Whitney acknowledged without turning. Thank you for coming. You said we should talk about Dominic. Yes. Whitney finally faced her. I thought you should know that your ex-husband didn't hire me. Vanessa frowned. What do you mean? You gave him the surveillance photos. I delivered the photos, yes. But I was hired by Liam Reynolds, Mr. Voss's friend. He suspected something was wrong in your marriage and wanted evidence before approaching Dominic. Why are you telling me this now? Because things have escalated beyond what anyone anticipated. Whitney's expression remained neutral. Mr. Reynolds is concerned about potential collateral damage. Collateral damage? Dominic is systematically destroying my life. And you systematically deceived him for years. Whitney's tone remained matter-of-fact. But Mr. Reynolds believes the situation has become volatile, particularly given Mr. Mercer's recent activities. Vanessa's heart skipped. What activities? He's hired people to find your ex-husband. Not investigators like me. People who operate outside the law. Dangerous people who aren't concerned with legal methods or limitations. I don't believe you. Silas wouldn't. Mr. Mercer is facing potential federal charges and the loss of his business and reputation. People in that position often make desperate choices. Whitney handed Vanessa a small recorder. This is a conversation between Mr. Mercer and a man named Victor Casimir, recorded yesterday. Mr. Casimir has connections to organized crime in 3 states. With shaking hands, Vanessa pressed play. Silas's voice emerged, tense but determined. I don't care how you find him. Just make sure he can't testify. If he's not available to press charges, this all goes away. A heavier voice, accented. Dead is simplest. I didn't say that, Silas replied quickly. Just incapacitated. Persuaded to withdraw the complaint. Use your judgment, but solve the problem. The recording ended. Vanessa stared at Whitney, her mouth dry. This could be fake. It's not. And Mr. Reynolds has already provided a copy to Detective Ferris. Whitney's eyes were sympathetic but firm. Mrs. Voss, you need to understand your position. Your ex-husband has evidence that could send both you and Mr. Mercer to prison. Mr. Mercer has now escalated to potential violence. You're caught in the middle. What am I supposed to do? Cooperate. Tell Detective Ferris everything you know about Mr. Mercer's plans. And if you have any way to contact Dominic, warn him immediately. Vanessa laughed bitterly. Warn him? He hates me, and I have no idea where he is. You might be surprised. Mr. Voss has been closer than you think. Whitney glanced at her watch. I've said what I came to say. What you do with this information is your choice. But I suggest you make it quickly. As Whitney walked away, Vanessa called after her. Why are you doing this? Why warn me? Whitney paused. Because despite everything, Mr. Voss doesn't want you hurt. He just wants justice. She continued down the dock without looking back. Alone, Vanessa stared at the recorder in her hand. Her mind raced through options, each worse than the last. If she went to the police, she'd be implicating Silas in a conspiracy to commit violence. If she warned Silas about the recording, she'd be aiding someone who had contemplated having her ex-husband harmed. If she did nothing, Dominic might be in danger. And despite everything, the thought of him being hurt because of her actions made her stomach clench. Her phone rang. Silas. Where are you? He demanded without preamble. I've been calling for an hour. I went for a walk. To clear my head. Well, get back home. I've got news. My contact thinks he's found Dominic. Vanessa's blood ran cold. Found him where? Montana. Small town called Rivercrest. He's been living there under the name Michael Foster, working as a carpenter. Silas sounded triumphant. Victor's people are already on their way. By this time tomorrow, our problem will be solved. Silas, wait. No more waiting. This ends now. His voice hardened. Be ready to leave town for a few days. Once this is handled, we'll need alibis. The line went dead. Vanessa stared at the phone, then at the recorder, then back at the phone. With sudden clarity, she made her decision. Detective Roland Ferris answered on the second ring. It's Vanessa Voss, she said without preamble. I need to talk to you about Silas Mercer. And I think Dominic is in danger. Chapter 8. Checkmate. Dominic Voss, now known to the residents of Rivercrest, Montana as Michael Foster, stood at his workbench, carefully sanding the curve of a rocking chair he was building for the mayor's wife. The workshop he'd established on the outskirts of town was smaller than his Connecticut studio, but it suited his needs. In the 6 months since leaving his old life, he'd built a reputation for exceptional craftsmanship and a preference for privacy. His phone buzzed with a text from Liam. Package delivered. Moving to Phase 3. Dominic smiled slightly. The package was the federal complaint against Vanessa and Silas, the culmination of years of meticulous documentation and planning. Phase 3 would be Whitney's meeting with Vanessa, scheduled for today. Everything was proceeding according to plan. The legal pressures were mounting. The psychological warfare, the surveillance, the anonymous messages had destabilized Vanessa's sense of security. And most importantly, Silas had taken the bait, hiring exactly the kind of unsavory characters Dominic had anticipated. Victor Casimir's reputation preceded him, a former enforcer for the Russian mob who now operated as an independent problem solver. Dominic had known about his connection to Silas for years, ever since Whitney had uncovered it during her initial investigation. It had been one of many pieces of information Dominic had filed away, knowing it might prove useful someday. Now, that day had come. His phone buzzed again, this time a call from Whitney. "It's done," she said when he answered. She took the recording, and she was shocked, but not surprised, if that makes sense. When I left, she was still deciding what to do. "She'll make the right choice," Dominic predicted. "Vanessa's self-preservation instinct is too strong. She won't go down with Silas's ship." "You're taking a big risk," Whitney cautioned. "If Casimir's people find you before the police move on Silas." "They won't find me," Dominic interrupted. "At least, not the real me." "What does that mean?" "It means I've been Michael Foster in public, but I haven't been living at the address associated with that identity. It's a workshop only, with a small apartment above it that appears occupied but isn't. Meanwhile, the cabin I actually live in is registered to a different LLC with no connection to either Dominic Voss or Michael Foster." Whitney's laugh was tinged with admiration. "You never do anything halfway, do you?" "Special Forces," Dominic replied simply. "Always maintain operational security." After hanging up, Dominic returned to his work, the rhythmic motion of sanding both purposeful and meditative. He didn't feel the bitter satisfaction he had expected when setting this plan in motion. Instead, there was a strange emptiness, the hollowness of a mission nearly completed but without the fulfillment he had anticipated. Had it been worth it? The years of pretending, of writing tuition checks while knowing the truth, of sleeping beside a woman who was planning his financial ruin? The answer came not in words but in the memory of Ivy's laughing voice. "What an idiot. I never even went to class." And Vanessa's cold smile. "The money went to your new dad, who will join us soon after the divorce." Yes, it had been worth it. Not for revenge, but for justice. Not to hurt them, but to ensure they couldn't hurt anyone else. His phone rang again, an unknown number. Dominic almost declined it, then remembered the final piece of his plan. He answered with a cautious hello. "Mr. Foster?" An unfamiliar voice, slightly accented. "I'm calling about custom furniture for my vacation home." The code phrase Whitney had established for danger. Dominic immediately switched to high alert. "I'm afraid I'm not taking new commissions at the moment," he replied, the countersign indicating he understood. "This would be a very lucrative job. Perhaps we could meet to discuss it." The voice was smooth, professional, and dangerous. "I'm actually in town. I could come to your workshop now." Casimir's men, moving faster than anticipated. Dominic checked his watch. The timing was tight, but still workable. "Of course," he replied pleasantly. "I'll be here for another hour or so." "Excellent. My associates and I will see you soon." After hanging up, Dominic sent a rapid series of texts. To Liam, visitors arriving early. Accelerate timeline. To Whitney, endgame initiated. Confirm police readiness. To a number he hadn't used in months. Now? Then he calmly closed his workshop for the day, locked the main doors, and retreated to his truck parked behind the building. As he drove away, he glanced in his rearview mirror at the workshop receding into the distance. By the time Casimir's men arrived, they would find only an empty building, and a surprise waiting for them. 300 miles away, in a small Connecticut police station, Detective Roland Ferris listened intently as Vanessa Voss detailed everything she knew about Silas Mercer's plans. The recording Whitney Reed had provided was playing in the background, Silas's voice filling the room with incriminating evidence. "And you believe Mr. Mercer has sent people to harm your ex-husband?" Ferris clarified. "Yes," Vanessa confirmed, her face pale. "He said they're in Montana already. A place called Rivercrest." Ferris exchanged glances with the FBI agent who had joined them. Agent Diana Morris nodded subtly and stepped out to make a call. "Mrs. Voss, you understand that by giving this statement, you're potentially implicating yourself in fraud charges?" "I know." Vanessa's voice was steady despite her obvious fear. But I never agreed to violence. Whatever Dominic did, he doesn't deserve this. Agent Morris returned, her expression urgent. Montana State Police just reported shots fired at a workshop registered to Michael Foster in Rivercrest. They're responding now. Vanessa's hand flew to her mouth. Oh God, are they saying if anyone was hurt? No information yet, Morris replied, her eyes on Ferris. But they found evidence of an ambush. Someone was waiting for the shooters. In Rivercrest, Dominic watched from a distance as police cruisers surrounded his workshop, lights flashing in the dusk. Through binoculars, he could see officers leading 3 men in handcuffs toward the vehicles. One appeared to be nursing a shoulder wound. His phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. A local detective he'd cultivated months ago. 3 in custody. Found exactly what you said we would. Evidence secured. Dominic smiled grimly. The evidence was a recording device he'd planted in the workshop, activated remotely when he'd received the warning call. It would have captured the men discussing their intentions for Michael Foster in detail, including who had sent them and why. Another text arrived, this one from Whitney, V cooperating fully. S being detained. Federal agents involved now. The final piece of his plan slid into place. Vanessa had made the choice he'd calculated she would, self-preservation over loyalty to Silas. With her testimony and the evidence he'd gathered, both would face consequences for their actions. Not the dramatic confrontation they perhaps deserved, but the cold, methodical justice of the legal system. As he drove away from Rivercrest for the last time, Dominic felt the weight of the past 4 years finally beginning to lift. The architect had designed one final structure, not of wood and nails, but of evidence and calculation. And like all his creations, it was built to last. Chapter 9, Reconstruction. 18 months later. The cabin overlooking Lake Champlain was precisely what Dominic had wanted, remote enough for privacy, but with sweeping views that prevented the isolation from feeling like confinement. The workshop he'd built behind the main house was smaller than his previous ones, designed for personal projects rather than commercial work. Today, he was finishing a dining table of black walnut, the wood's rich grain emerging under his careful attention. The rhythmic motion of sanding had become his meditation, a way to process the events of the past 2 years. His phone chimed with an email notification, Liam's regular update. Dominic set down his tools and opened the message. Final update on the Mercer/Voss situation. Silas Mercer, sentenced to 6 years for wire fraud, conspiracy, and solicitation of felony assault. Serving time at Federal Correctional Institution in Danbury, Connecticut. All assets seized or frozen pending further investigation into other financial irregularities uncovered during the case. Vanessa Voss, now Klein again, received 18 months for conspiracy to commit fraud, served 9 months before parole. Current whereabouts unknown, though there are reports she's living with her sister Patricia in Rhode Island. Divorce finalized last month, as you know. Ivy Mercer, expelled from Westlake University. No criminal charges due to cooperation agreement. Working as a receptionist at a dental office in Massachusetts, according to social media. All legal matters concerning you are now officially closed. The identity of Michael Foster has been retired per your request. Your new documentation under your real name is working without issues. Whitney sends her regards and asks if you're still looking for interesting cases in your area. She has a proposition if you're interested. Let me know if you need anything else. Hope the Vermont air is treating you well. Liam. Dominic set the phone down and returned to his sanding. The update brought no satisfaction, no sense of triumph, only closure. The architect had built his revenge not for joy but for necessity, not with passion but with precision. His doorbell rang, an unusual occurrence given his remote location. Through the security camera, he saw a familiar face, Detective Roland Ferris, now wearing plain clothes instead of his usual suit. Dominic opened the door without hesitation. Detective, long way from Connecticut. Just Roland now, the former detective corrected. I retired last month, and I was in Burlington visiting my daughter at the university. Thought I'd stop by. How did you find me? Roland's smile was knowing. You're not the only one with investigative skills, Mr. Voss. Dominic gestured him inside. The 2 men settled in the living room, windows framing the lake beyond. Nice place, Roland commented. Peaceful. That's the idea. Dominic studied the former detective. I assume this isn't just a social call. No. Roland placed a file on the coffee table. I brought you something. The case is closed, all appeals exhausted. Thought you might want these for your records. Dominic opened the file. Inside were photos of Silas and Vanessa in court, newspaper clippings about the case, and finally, a letter in Vanessa's handwriting. He glanced at Roland questioningly. She wrote that during her prison term, Roland explained, asked me to deliver it if I ever found you. Said she owed you at least that much. Reluctantly, Dominic unfolded the letter. Dominic, by now you've won. Completely and utterly. You outplayed us at every turn. I won't ask for forgiveness. We both know I don't deserve it. But I will tell you something I should have said years ago. You were the best man I ever knew. Too good for me, certainly. Too good for the life I dragged you into. What you built was real. The care you showed Ivy, the home you created, the love you offered, those weren't illusions, even if my response to them was false. You deserve better. I'm sorry I wasn't capable of being what you deserved. I don't expect to hear from you. I don't expect anything. But I wanted you to know that in the silence of a prison cell, with everything stripped away, I finally understand what I threw away. Vanessa. Dominic refolded the letter and returned it to the file without comment. You don't have to keep it, Roland said gently. I know. Dominic met the former detective's gaze. But it's part of the record now. Roland nodded, understanding. The whole case was extraordinary. In 30 years of police work, I've never seen anyone execute something so comprehensive. Special forces, Dominic said with a faint smile. Long-term strategic planning. Still, Roland shook his head in admiration. You knew exactly how they'd react at every stage. The surveillance to make them paranoid. The legal pressure to make them desperate. Creating the perfect conditions for Mercer to overreach with Casimir. I knew who they were, Dominic said simply. Vanessa always chose self-preservation. Silas always believed he could buy or bully his way out of trouble. Ivy always took the easy path. None of them could resist their nature when pressured. And you? What couldn't you resist? Dominic considered the question. Justice, he said finally. Not revenge, there's a difference. Revenge is emotional. Justice is structural. I wanted them to face consequences proportional to their actions. Well, they did. Roland rose to leave. What will you do now? Dominic glanced toward his workshop, visible through the window. Build something new. Something honest this time. As Roland drove away, Dominic returned to his workshop, to the table waiting for his attention. The wood beneath his hands was flawed but beautiful, its imperfections adding character rather than detracting from it. With patience and skill, those flaws could become features, integrated into a greater whole. He worked until sunset, losing himself in the craft that had sustained him through the darkest periods of his life. When he finally stopped, the table was complete, solid, functional, and built to last for generations. Unlike his revenge, this creation brought him genuine satisfaction. The architect had finally found a blueprint worth following, not one designed for destruction, but for building a life of integrity, on a foundation no one could undermine. The last tuition payment had been made in full. The debt was settled, and Dominic Voss was free to begin again. This is where our story comes to an end. Share your thoughts in the comments section. Thanks for your time. If you enjoy this story, please subscribe to this channel. Click on the video you see on the screen, and I will see you there.